Ladies and gentlemen, in the world of chess, when a world champion and their challenger are going to play against each other, sometimes the months prior also have matchups. Well, Norway Chess is exactly that. And today, Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi will square off in classical chess and potentially the Armageddon format. And well, I'm going to tell you all about it. But first, I want to thank Fabulous, who is the sponsor of this video. Fabulous is the #1 self-care app to help you build better habits and achieve your goals. It's based on behavioral science and taking small incremental steps so that you're successfully completing tasks every day. For example, when I wake up in the morning, I absent-mindedly grab my phone. I actually find myself doing this throughout the day, and I waste a lot of time. And Fabulous has helped me get that in check. Whenever I start to drift, I will do one of the self-guided habits that I put into the app to get me back on track. And so that's how the app works. There are two approaches. The first one is being self-guided. You can put things like drinking water or decluttering the house, making the bed, for example. And by the way, if you do go premium on Fabulous, you get unlimited access to journeys, to the community, which is called circles, and you can interact with other folks. So today you can start building your ideal routine. There is a link in the description, and the first 100 of you who are lucky enough to click on it are eligible to sign up for a week trial and 25% off a Fabulous subscription. Are you still listening to me talk? Go click the link. Go make your life fabulous. As always, timestamps are on the video player. Don't jump ahead though, because there's interesting games all around. Richard Rapport, Alireza Firouzja is the first matchup, and we have something known as the Grunfeld defense. This is the classical game. We're always going to start with the classical game first. Friendly reminder, if the game is drawn, the players sit down with the same exact colors. Black gets 7 minutes, white gets 10. Extra bonus second starts on move 41, and black gets less time because if the game is a draw, black wins. That's called draw odds. So knight f3, bishop g7, and Rapport takes, and plays bishop to d2. And the idea of this is that white is going to recapture on c3 with the bishop, oftentimes trading off this bishop by means of playing the move d5 as well. It's an interesting system. Black here plays castles and rook c1. This is extra kind of reinforcement over here, and because black's main idea is to play c5 normally here to complement the bishop on g7, this can just stabilize this c file very nicely. Like, for example, something like this is very good for white because white just maintains this pawn advantage. So, rook to c1 is played. Alireza here plays knight c3, which is the third most popular move in the position, and decides to just play knight d7. So he's not committing any sort of pawn move, and he's giving the center completely to Rapport. Like, if Rapport wants to play e4, bishop d3, he absolutely can do that. He chooses to be a bit more solid with e3 and bishop e2, and then here he plays a very unique move. I'm not exactly sure if this is theoretical, but essentially black's entire game is set around this, so he just plays b4. He delays castling, and he plays the move b4. Now Alireza is going to have difficulties, because the traditional break c5 here simply fails with the reinforcement of the rook. Takes, and this pawn is indirectly protected by this rook, because the bishops can see each other. So something like bishop c3, rook c3 is okay for white. I wonder if there's even something better, like just castling first and only then taking, because black's position isn't wonderful. And Alireza really didn't like it. He decided to just use his knight to create counterplay by putting it on e4, and Rapport goes back to a1. So still there is a standoff of these bishops. We will see what happens in the center of the board. And now Alireza plays queen d6. Queen d6 attacks the pawn on b4, which Rapport just promptly misses. I'm just kidding, he didn't miss it. But if you take queen takes b4, let's not forget, again, that rook on c1, extremely useful to pressure, and would start beating things up in the position. So knight e5 is a very nice move. You also want Alireza to take it so that you end up with the only dark-squared bishop on the board, and your opponent has a lot of weaknesses. Of course, Alireza doesn't do that. He puts his f-rook on c8 to defend the c7 pawn. Now, the problem with this move is that optically it just looks a little bit cramped. Like, now, if black doesn't successfully break out of the position by means of like c5, he's going to be in some trouble. So, of course, queen a4, which patrols this, and also now protects the b pawn, Like, the real question is Alireza going to play c5? Right now is the moment. You can play this move c5, pandemonium breaks loose, you got to calculate b takes, you got to calculate d takes, you have to calculate b then d, you have to calculate d then b, you got to calculate b then nothing, and then you have to calculate d then nothing, and then you have to calculate nothing. And what I mean by nothing is no capture. Like, for example, you have to calculate this and then a move, or both captures, or you can just calculate bishop c4. I mean, this is the thing about classical chess. There's moments, there are literally dozens of potential positions that can arise. And you have to constantly be evaluating whether one is good or not. So Alireza plays a6, and Rapport says, you will now never play c5 again. And if you do, you will suffer massively. So he puts the knight on c6. Alireza plays this move and decides to take on c6. So now we have a big trade, and he's looking to create counterplay down the a file. The problem is that the player with the two bishops, as the board opens up more and more, is going to be happier, not to mention the c file and the c7 weakness is really unpleasant. So Rapport plays this move, which tickles the knight. The knight must move. You cannot play the move f5, because first of all endgames for you are just simply going to be depressing if you allow this. And, well, there's something else in this position, and it's the fact that if f5, now I can actually take on b5. So I will always have this check. You see, a move ago, you might say, well, Levy, why didn't he take on b5? Because this, and then this, and then bishop c4, there is knight d2, which forks you. And the more Alireza can trade, the happier he is. So bishop d3 is a very annoying move, because f5 just doesn't work. You have to just remove your knight from the center, and now I plant my bishop on c4. So the board is opening up. How is Richard Rapport going to convert this position, if he's going to convert it at all? Well, he's going to double up on the c-file. That's not surprising. And now he attacks the rook and removes it from the guard of the c7 pawn. But first, he attacks the knight. Where's it going to go? Alireza plays a very nice defensive move, rook b6, looking to trade and relieve some of the pressure. But the problem with this move is that you've now given yourself these weaknesses. And Rapport plays bishop here and bishop c6. And he's just got what's known as nagging pressure here. Very annoying to deal with this position. So knight b1. Alireza puts his knight as an imposter of his opponent. Now that knight is just on b1 like, no, I'm actually a white knight, haha. Bishop d5, knight c3, he's trying to get it traded. This would be very nice for him because rook c7. Nice slow move, and you can't actually move the rook because the queen is there. Rapport doesn't blunder that. f4, e6, and g4. When in doubt, just push all your pawns, right? I mean, that's the way you're going to get an advantage. And then a few moves later, he even pushes the h-pawn. So he takes as much space as possible while his bishop on a1 applies pressure to the knight. And at this point, Alireza officially doesn't know exactly what to do with his position. So he makes a couple of bad moves with low time on the clock. And after a3, there are serious problems. Because I told you, the person with the bishop pair wants pieces off the board and wants to take space. Certain pawn trades have occurred, and Rapport has taken as much pawn space as possible. And at some point, a forward pawn move will be the deciding factor. And now here it comes. That bishop has come alive. There is a king on the other side of the diagonal. Takes, 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 takes. The position is not improving much for Alireza. It is still a brutal defensive task. He is up to the task, but Rapport now plays d6. He plays d6, and the bishops are alive on these diagonals. The pawn can be hunted down with a move like rook d8, but rook d1. You're still pinned. That's the problem. And now d7, and now rook d6. And the pressure just never, ever, ever loosens up. I mean, bishop c4, rook c6, rook c8, just every move, just it's like Alireza's right on the verge of defending the position. Here he had to play bishop b6 apparently to try to survive a little bit longer. He goes here, and now a nice little deflection tactic. If you take on f7, there is this. If you take this, there is this. And of course, taking on d7 is the big question. And if you take on d7, I just come right back. And all that time and effort you spent winning my d-pawn, you have no way of protecting your other things. So now I take g6, I take b4, and Alireza resigned in view of the fact that he has been left with no pawns in an endgame. I mean, he's just going to be losing here. So constant belligerent pressure from Rapport this game. Good defense by Alireza, but unfortunately not good enough. And I just stepped on a green bean, which I had here from lunch. So that's good. So my day's kind of interesting. Rapport now is just dominating the event. I think that's his second win in Classical. which is amazing. He also beat Tari in Classical. He lost against Magnus in the Armageddon, but he did beat Karjakin, so an excellent event by him. And speaking of Karjakin and Tari, here is their Classical game. A Rui Lopez with an offer to go to a Berlin. Now, Tari has the option, of course, to decline the Berlin, but the Berlin really poses not a huge risk, especially after rook to e1. And the point is that when this trade occurs and bishop back to f1, the players just have complete symmetry. And this game was the two players. So I would love to like focus more on this. But what's going to happen is both players are going to develop some pieces now, and they're going to trade everything. Like, they are literally going to trade every piece. They are going to trade every piece in about a moment. There it goes. There it goes. And now we have a repetition of moves. So the Berlin is a very common draw, but the Rook E1 Berlin is particularly, I mean, you know, there is the forced draw line, but the main line Berlin, which is this endgame, the Berlin endgame, actually can be pretty interesting. I don't really know how well to summarize this game, but it was a draw, which means we just got to go to the Armageddon. I mean, what do you want me to say? So we have an Armageddon. So Tari gets 10 minutes, Karjakin gets 7, and if they make it to the 40th move, they start getting a 1-second bonus. And if they, if Karjakin draws the game, then he wins, because he starts the game with less time. Okay, wonderful. Now we have an anti-Berlin. So I don't know why Tari decided to play this in the Armageddon, but he decides to play this in the Armageddon. Bishop c5. Now it's very common to play bishop c6 in these positions, the damaged black structure. Tari doesn't exactly do that. He actually uses a slightly different move order. And yeah, if you're wondering why Karjakin develops and then goes here, it's because he's trying to counteract his bishop on g5, castles, d6, and a couple moves later we do in fact have this, and then knight c3. Now, visually, position looks very promising here for white. He's got a good control of the center. He has a little bit more space maybe in the center of the board. Rook e1, f3, you know, position looks nice, but black has the bishop pair, black has the open b file, and black actually has more pawns kind of in the center. So he can like play d5, for example, at certain moments. And it's difficult for white to do something in the center. So first of all, we have to protect c6. Now we have h3, that's preventing anything from coming over here. Okay, now see, Karjakin's going to fight with c5. The knight moves out of the way. Bishop c6, I told you. This, so now knight g3. And there is rook e8. So here comes bishop f8 and the pressure on this pawn. Queen f3, voluntarily pinning yourself. So black now continues with the plan of bishop to f8 and queen e7. Karjakin playing very logical chess. Like, there's a weakness on e4, so let me put all of my pieces into targeting it. Knight to f5 attacks the queen. The queen just goes directly to the middle of the board. Why? Because this is impossible. This is impossible because I can take the knight. Take, and now, congratulations, you have the ugliest pawn structure ever. So that's not very good at all. So, Tari plays knight d5, and now we have congestion. We have some serious congestion in the center of the board. So, a good player will see through the nonsense. They will see through all of the different things and find the best plan, and Karjakin does that. He just calmly takes and then slides back. And the question is, what is this knight doing, and how do you prevent the queen from just going to b2 and beating the crap out of all of your pawns? So Tari plays this, and Karjakin just takes the pawn. And then takes another pawn. So now he's 2 pawns up. Tari's hanging around the king. You know, Tari's got some ideas. Bishop h6, knight f6. Maybe some way to get the rook over here. I don't know. Create an attack. What's he going to do? He just goes all in and takes on h6. Now, just like, look, you can play gh6, but you just allow knight f6. There's no need to allow this. So instead, he offers a queen trade, because that's the practical decision. You offer a trade of queens. And then when the rook comes, you're like, uh-oh, that's bad. The rook is coming over here. So let me back up and attack this queen. Queen goes to f6. And I think he went queen f6 because Karjakin is actually offering a draw. I'm not even kidding, because it's Armageddon. It's not rated, so a draw is a win in Armageddon for the black pieces. Tari's like, well, I can't make a draw because I'm trying to win. The problem is I'm not sure I'm in any business of winning this game. So black is a pawn up with queen and 2 bishops versus queen, bishop, knight. And a passed c-pawn, like c4, you know, and just becoming a queen. So if you Take on a7, you lose your bishop. So we have queen e3, queen d4. He's really trying to chase this queen around, and he's like, all right, you don't want a queen trade. You don't want a queen trade. Let's have a queen trade. Now you can't move your bishop. Queen f4, and I mean, Karjakin's just pushing the c-pawn. He doesn't have to move anything. His king is completely defended. White is creating absolutely no threats. Now white can, at this point, play knight g5, which he does. It is never too late to blunder mate in 2. Okay, so that is not what's going to happen. He offers a queen trade again. Tari again declines. And now the queen just goes back to f5. Queen c7, bishop b5, and white actually created a little bit of a problem here for black, because this pawn is so far advanced, but can't really go anywhere. So Tari won himself a pawn. He just has to do this in the right way. The problem is that after queen e5, you just don't have anything. You just don't have anything. f4 is very tricky. This is a free bishop, except for the fact that it hangs mate again, so don't hang mate. But queen d5 just doesn't hang mate. These are very good players. They're not going to hang a mate. So queen c2, bishop d3. And he takes everything. He takes everything. He takes everything. There is no mate. Tari's really working hard, but everything is super well defended. And, well, Karjakin is like, I'm just going to guard my king and push my a-pawn, and for like the 20th time offer a queen trade. He doesn't want a queen trade, then I'm going to push my pawn. Karjakin had two strategies this game. Protect queen, no, 3 strategies. Protect his king, push a pawn, and offer queen trades. That's all he did, and he wins the game by taking a knight, and then finally getting a queen trade. He didn't have to do this. He could have given a couple more checks and then, but yeah, the thing is that queen f8 is being threatened. So Karjakin wins in Armageddon. Not the most exhilarating match like Turi Lopez's, where Karjakin just showed a little bit of a level difference. Yeah, he played very, very solidly with black. Tari kind of got his pieces tangled in the middle of the board, but folks, we know why you clicked on this video, and you probably clicked the timestamp. I don't know how many times we have to go through this. Go back and watch. This video already had a sponsored plug. Still got to put the mid-roll ads on it. You know how it is. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event of the evening. It's Magnus Carlsen. It's Jan Nepomniachtchi. It's the last time these two dudes play each other, unless they play each other on anonymous Lichess bullet games, before their World Championship match in Dubai in November, and I think potentially early December. What are we going to get? Are they going to play any preparation? Magnus Carlsen trots out e4, and Jan Nepomniachtchi plays the Berlin. And obviously, Magnus Carlsen is not a fan of quick draw, so he declines the Berlin by playing directly into the Berlin. Endgame. Okay. Now, the thing about Magnus is that neither one of these two guys probably wants to give away all their prep. So they're actually kind of content playing a Berlin, because that gives away nothing. Because they both know the Berlin. But what is Magnus going to do? Is he going to wrinkle somewhere in the Berlin? So first of all, he plays the second main line, which is rook d1. You don't always have to play this move. King goes back to e8, and now knight c3. Now, at this point, there's many moves for black. Nepo plays the 4th most popular option, which then transposes to a different position, but he plays bishop e6. The reason why this is known as slightly suboptimal is that the bishop can immediately be targeted and has to go back. And ladies and gentlemen, in this position, the players opted to repeat moves. Just kidding. He did go back. That was not very nice. I'm sorry. And Magnus plays h3. Just a waiting move. Sometimes in these Berlin endgames, g4, f4 happens, bishop e3. Jan attacks the knight. And the knight goes back to f3. And now we have h5. h5 is completely designed against g4, because you know g4 is coming, so you prepare this capture. This now opens up the h-file, and black is just completely winning, actually. Believe it or not. One small pawn trade at this level, and this game is completely over. Like, black is positionally now much, much better, because white is completely overextended. And you also can learn about pawn overextensions by getting the intermediate bootcamp. Check out the link in the description. So, knight to e2 back. The idea of knight to e2 is that you in many situations want to bolster with c3 and fight in some capacity for the center, because where was this knight ever going on c3? Nowhere. Very good. Knight e2, and black trades on h4. Super common also in the Berlin to offer this exchange, to just liquidate some of white's pieces. Now, here, many moves have been played. 1, 2, 3. Magnus Carlsen plays a move that's never been played before. Inspiration over the board, kind of a little bluff. Maybe he's diving into his bag of tricks. I don't think there's many tricks in the Berlin, but it is what it is. He plays G3. Not a groundbreaking move. It's pawn up 1 square, all right? When you do it, the computer calls it a blunder. When he does it, he's Magnus Carlsen. Oh my God, ooh ah, it's so cool. Okay, bishop goes back, and now king protects this pawn from the bishop. What do the players want in this position? Well, Jan wants a pawn, and Magnus doesn't want to lose a pawn. Objectively, the position is pretty balanced. Now it's a question of how is black going to safeguard the king? Okay, first black plays c5. Now the knight cannot go to d4, so bishop e3 and g5. So the bishop is going to protect both pawns as it escorts both pawns up the board. Magnus plays f3 with the intention of playing g4. So for example, Magnus's idea is to get this. After hg, it's to play hg, and then to maybe even trade the rook, or to use the g file as a lever for the knight into f5, and to get a potentially pretty promising endgame, or e4. So this little pawn wall kind of negates the power of the two bishops, right? So that would be very pleasant for white. So what does Jan do? He just throws the pawn into g4. He's like, you want g4? That's so funny, Magnus, because I could have sworn I didn't ask. All right? I just censored myself in a YouTube video, live. That wasn't even edited. Pretty cool, right? I didn't ask. I want g4 myself. Now I'm going to take on f3, and I'm going to play this move b6 so I never have to deal with any problems. Now, I would have expected something like a4 here from Magnus, maybe b4, instigating on the queen side. Magnus chooses to double up. The problem with that is black will immediately trade rooks. And then black is going to play bishop to d8. White plays h4. Now the plan with g4 is gone. Yeah, Jan plays c6, covering the entrance point of d5. d6 is looking a little bit soft. Knight goes back to g2, check. And a couple moves later, the players decided that they had had enough. They maneuvered a little bit. A bishop went to g5, and pieces were promptly traded, leading to an endgame that is a draw. And if you're wondering why Jan doesn't take on e5, because why are you going to let Magnus take some pawns? All Magnus needs is a small degree of imbalance, and he can play on forever. So instead of that, Jan's like, draw. Boom. Which means we have Armageddon. Magnus Carlsen is granted 10 minutes on the clock. Jan Nepomniachtchi is granted 7. And if Jan holds, then he wins the Armageddon. Magnus begins with knight f3. Now, if you get Jan with the black pieces, there's going to be a g6, and there might be a d5 and a c5. So there's d5, and there's g6. This is very common. And actually, the opening that we get, Magnus doesn't go for full symmetry. He goes for c4. So it's kind of a King's Indian attack ready fusion. And now black has a couple options. You can take, you can push, or you can be very solid with c6. So generally, Grunfeld players will play c6, d5, kind of going for one of these. And then these positions are strangely symmetrical but annoying for black to always play. So Magnus plays b3, which just doesn't look like it makes much sense considering this rook is here. But this is fine because if black plays knight to e4, you just go here, which actually happens in the game. That's exactly what happens. And this is actually, I believe there's some positions where black even plays c5. Maybe not right now because black already played c6, but there are definitely positions where in other structures, like the move knight e4 comes and then c5 comes if white has played d4. But since black already played c6, he's not going to do that here. Bishop b2. So how do you play a position where you got a double fianchetto into a single fianchetto? Knight is in the middle, trying to like trade off here when this knight comes out. a5. Flank pawn pushes to beat up the, the doubled a pawn. Kind of standard. Knight c3, bishop f5, finishing development. And Magnus is like, all right, everything looks good. My next move is either knight e5 or knight h4 to target this. So Jan takes on c3 and shoves the bishop into e4. Because what are you going to do about this bishop? If you play a move like knight d2, well, I'm very happy. I'm just making trades. I go e6. I go move my queen, move my knight somewhere. I got no problems. So Magnus is like, I don't really like that. I'm going to go queen e2. And Jan just keeps pushing. He's like, I don't believe in your position, a4. Magnus is like, let me slide my rook over to c1. If you take on b3 and try to quickly liquidate, I'm not too afraid of this. I mean, aren't I happy here? And by the way, Jan maybe could have just played a bit slowly, But then Magnus probably would have gone here, and you see what his idea is? He's trying to not trade the bishop. He's trying to make this bishop, like, take the knight, which would give Magnus just the bishop pair, and a position that he can play forever. So, Jan decides to take on b3. The problem is, you got the GOAT of endgames slowly bringing this game to a situation where he might have an endgame with an open file. Jan goes here. Magnus plays this move. Now, when b4 is played, the first thing I think of is dc4. Like, the pawns have been split, so you might as well take. Then queen c4. And the question is, who is happier here? And how is white ever going to make some forward progress here? And the truth is, after something like bishop d5, queen c5, you, of course, don't have to take. No one said you had to take. You can just move out of the way and try to get rid of this queen slowly. But white still has a bit of a pleasant position here. So Jan decides to play knight d7. The problem is, now Magnus's structure never needs to be damaged, ever, because he plays c5. And when the queen is kicked out, he plays rook a7. And you want to play a move like queen b8 to kick out the rook, but now I just throw my queen in there, and things are going from bad to worse. Black has to be super clutch in this position. First of all, here the scumbag computer says bishop to b1, which, I mean, just looks completely moronic. Obviously, if takes, there is this, but if you don't take, then the bishop just dances around and is like, haha, I'm threatening to trap the rook. Seriously, like, that is actually the threat in some positions, to trap this rook, which is ridiculous. So, Jan decides to take f3. Now, that's a big decision to take on f3. He's like, this is my one chance to trade this bishop, because if Magnus moves this knight, tries to push, I don't know, I'm going to trade, and then I'm going to play e5. The problem is that the gentleman who has been bestowed, or no, you're supposed to say bestowed upon. Anyway, whatever, it's not an English class. The individual who has been granted the bishop pair wants to open the board and has to look for pawn breaks. So ladies and gentlemen, you too can play like Magnus Carlsen. What did Magnus play in this position? What's a good pawn break here to complement this bishop? If you said b5, you are correct. If you said e4, you need a slap. What about this? What about this? You're not the only one making plans on the board, huh? So selfish. Now, b5 is a good move, because if e4, which was the whole idea, just calmly slide back. These pawns are coming in on this side of the board. And here we go. Knight c5 is a nice little tactic. Of course, if Magnus takes, there is this. But Magnus saw ahead of that. Bishop b4. Uh-oh, bishop's out of the pin, and bishop is pinning the knight to the rook. And Jan is going to suffer some material loss. Rook takes b7. Look at how clean that move is. All Magnus has to do is play b6. And that's probably even cleaner. But he sees the sacrifice. Queen a6, and if you take, my pawn promotes, so I'm going to scoop a couple of pawns up, and even though I only have one pawn up, this is coming. And this is a really nice endgame, because that pawn on d5 is a very weak one, and I just play here, and I play here, and I play here, and I'm 2 pawns up. How do I win this? By being Magnus Carlsen. h5 to soften up your structure. Now all your pawns are going to fall. Boom. Now I take on g6. I take on e4. And the more passed pawns that I can get, the better. I got 3 of them. So a few moves later, it's Jan Nepomniachtchi resigning against Magnus Carlsen in the Armageddon. And, well, time for your hot takes, ladies and gentlemen. What do you take away from this matchup? That's the whole point that these players play each other, and for me to make this video is for the hot takes. You know it, and I know it. What do we think? Let's psychoanalyze the players. A person in a YouTube comment called me a zebra the other day and said that I'm excitable and not tameable like a horse. And everybody loves horses, but zebras are untamed, and for that reason I will struggle to get the Grandmaster title. So, I'm not kidding, by the way. You should check my Twitter. I posted the comment there. So what is your hot take? And if you could compare Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi to animals, what would they be? And on that note, I'm signing off. I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out. I'll see you in the next one. Get out of here.